Uh, Thanks for a good action-packed morning. Good time of discussion over lunch. I know we lost a few folks to flights, but still got a good core group. And we've got my friend, Lane Howard from NCGA is going to talk to us about various levers to help get things continue moving. Lane, I'll turn the floor over to you.
All right. There's no greater honor than going after lunch, and another great honor is being last on the agenda. So I'm sure everybody's riveted and ready to go. For those of you who don't know me, Lane Howard, Director of Biofuels for National Corn Growers Association. I've structured these comments related to what levers we're going to pull to achieve our goals, kind of in the manner of where we are, what we want and how do we want to get there, and then what questions still exist. So a recap from this morning, we heard Marty tell us that feedstocks available today and will increase it going into the future when we look at the yield curve. Should not be concerned with livestock rations. Rations will adjust, and they likely will not eliminate our exports. We heard from GM tell us that current capacity is in excess of production. So we have room to increase production and meet capacity. The industry has historically moved to meet and exceed demand, and plant efficiencies will lead to higher gallons per bushel yield. The outlook is that we could build out to 20 billion gallons by 2030, and then 30 billion gallons by 2035. From the automotive sector, we did hear that there is a need for drop-in fuel when and if possible. And Steve shared that everything must meet ASTM specs. We also heard that there needs to be customer acceptance on value, change, and ease of use. Known properties with minimal impact to other systems. But I think I said that right. Known properties with minimal impact to other systems. I feel like I skipped a word. In regulations that do not pick a winner. And then lastly, Reed shared that infrastructure is yes, ready, with some needed adjustments, upgrades. I would like to flag that as we look at infrastructure, we know that tanks are E100 compatible that are put on the ground today. Wayne dispensers are E40 compatible as their base model, and I think there's some pressure on the industry, specifically because of work done in Iowa and Nebraska, that has led Gilbarco to kind of pursue that path as well. I kind of identified 4 key areas to success as we move this forward. Whatever our goals are, that I think the commonality in the room is to look at longevity with liquid fuels, with some of us looking at higher ethanol blends. 4 key areas I identified are the coalition, value, communications, and advocacy. So as far as building the coalition, I think it's very important that we find common ground with a common goal. There are various stakeholders within the room. Everybody has some link that connects us all, whether it's octane and performance, whether it's lower greenhouse gas emissions, and it doesn't have to be necessarily the same common link. I think the bar talk last night, we decided that was strategic partnerships. But I think we also need to look around the room and think about new partners who provide value to the group as a whole. And then somehow come up with a unified approach. We heard that from Anthony and others earlier. Unified approach with no opposition is very attractive to this administration, probably any administration and anybody on the Hill. Anthony also shared that whatever makes the most impact for everyone and has the best ROI. Some specific solutions specific solutions are necessary. We need to go in with a targeted list that we will also help provide cover on. So as we think about building the coalition and expanding the tent, I think it is necessary to look around the room, identify partners that are or aren't here, and if it's the right people that we do have present. Next, I want to discuss value. What is our value proposition? And I heard Chip say earlier, how do we make liquid fuels desirable for the consumer? And I think that is the approach that we have to take when we move forward, right? So it's not necessarily what is best politically, but because we've heard Alexander tell us over and over again that the consumer can help drive that political conversation. I do think it's important that we understand our potential, but know the ripple effects. We heard from several things this morning that could be considered within those ripple effects, such as biomass supply, fuel supply, livestock, and retail. And hopefully most of those concerns have been addressed as we've had those conversations today, and leaving minimal questions about whether or not we can meet the needs and whether or not we'll face blowback. And then also think that it's important that we look at and understand how we, the collective group, provide value, and we tie that back into the commonalities that we all have. So things that we discussed today: jobs and economic impact, the price proposition, right? The value in there, octane and performance, and efficiency, and then, as has been highlighted several times today, domestic, affordable, and reliable energy. Specifically, what I heard Krista say was that E15 could more than double our GDP and household income while increasing jobs 50%. Tying that back into the current administration and the current atmosphere in DC, I think gives us one of our many really good talking points. Ernie and I were chatting before this started, and it seems like communication is an area that most of us have already kind of unified around. So one thing that I jotted down was we have to identify our customer, right? Customer in quotes, because we may not be talking directly to the consumer. What we did hear from Steve earlier, ProTech, Steve from ProTech, yeah, was that if you minimize the change the consumer has to adopt, you see greater adoption. And we're seeing that at other retail locations as well. If you replace your 87 with E15, there's no questions asked. One of the stories I like to share is that our local Casey's offers, the 3 E10 blends, an E15 and an E85. And whenever I went in one night, there was a lady asking a lot of questions about why the blue handles, which was E15 unleaded 88, were bagged and what she could do. And I assured her that, she could use the red handle, and she just kept telling me she didn't know. And so, I won't repeat the exact language that was used yesterday related to consumers, but sometimes they're misinformed or just uninformed, and maybe that's okay. But if we eliminate the number of changes they have to adopt, then I think we'll see greater adoption to mid-level or higher blends. Based on Alexander's conversations today, it's important to know the consumer and then tailor the message. Again, the domestic, affordable, reliable energy is good for the current political atmosphere. But it is important to understand that it takes both sides, and we should probably likely highlight the lower greenhouse gas emissions, or be ready to highlight, and the air quality benefits that higher blends, higher efficiencies can provide. And then, this probably seems like something that's common sense, but I think it's important to know what we are saying. And then after we figure out what targeted communications we need to be able to distill that information down into a usable form. We had a conversation last night that there are a lot of us with a lot of research with a lot of good talking points, but a lot of those things aren't targeted to any audience or distilled down to where it can be shared broadly. We've recently done several studies related to E15 at National Corn with some state partners, and that returned, 25 pages of data and commentary. And that's not useful for the consumer, not useful for my growers, and not useful for the partners we're trying to have a conversation with. So it was up to some of us to be able to distill that down into the talking points that we need, into basically how does it impact that audience, right? So for our growers, it's what's this do to your bottom line and demand. For the consumers, it's how does this save you money, and how is this important? And then the hill, it's the domestic, affordable, reliable energy that I think I'm going to hang on to for a while. And then we heard the need to focus on farmers. Mile told us that farmers are the hero that makes this all possible whenever we're talking with consumers and policymakers. And then I wanted to leave you with the fact that farmers are dedicated to leaving things better than they found it. They are the ultimate sustainable, regenerative group. No farmer goes into the business to leave things worse. In fact, generally they want to leave it to their family and make sure that it's profitable for them as well. And then thinking through, we need to identify ways to advocate. So that comes with strategy, that comes with communication. So developing those plans, and then we need to develop our advocates, whether that's folks in the room or folks that might be in different parts of the company and organization. And then, of course, we will never be able to ignore the fact that advocacy on our own, or collectively, is necessary. We will need a multi-pronged approach. We've heard about federal and state legislation, from E15 to LCFS, to the carbon pipelines and clean fuel standards. But then federal and state regulation are also important to stay up to date on. And we heard that from Michael, Jimmy, Salo yesterday. And then litigation when necessary, if that's your, if you so choose to accept. So the multi-pronged approach, the multifaceted approach, has proven to be successful, right? I mean, the litigation led to conversations around ACC 1, and then that led to the CRA conversation on the Hill, and this administration on ACC 2. So questions that I heard today, and I hope this kind of segues into how Ernie wants to end. Questions that I heard: how do we provide longevity in regulation and legislation? How do we avoid being attacked by the pendulum every 4 years? How do we account for emissions? What methodology? Whether we're going to use a well-to-wheels approach. Sounds like there is some synergy in the industry on the well-to-wheels approach. And then who is our customer? Is our customer the consumer, or is our customer the policymaker? Thinking this group holistically, who is our customer? And then the last one, what is engine longevity? So all these things that need to be identified for us to be able to move forward. All right, Ernie, how do we want to proceed into the question on the broader group on how we move forward? I'll happily run the mic.
Well, thanks, Lane, for that recap and for identifying some of the most important issues that we heard here. And we call it the levers that still need to be pulled because we're not where we want to be. We're now at the point of the program where we're really going to be trying to be more specific about actions. And we're going to be looking at you and looking for hands to go up to say, oh, I'd like to work on that. So be forewarned. If I don't see the hand up and I see somebody going like that, you may be volunteering for a committee. But maybe just begin with a thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you to the program committee that put this together. And I know we dumped a ton of information out here. And we did that intentionally because not everybody is on the same page. And we thought we needed to kind of refresh the baseline. So the program committee that worked to put all this together was composed of Brian West, Elena Chapman, Elena Jetty, Reed Wagner, Jimmy Condi, Michael Hartrick, Miles Ciotti, Lane Howard, and we had others that pitched in from time to time offering ideas. So thank you for putting that time in and helping us to put together a flow that helps you be more up to speed. So we spent a day doing this dump, this review, and I hope we've come away in alignment that we do see a fresh window opening. Liquid fuels are back. They never went away, as Alexander said, but this is our moment to surge. This is our moment to show up with information, with products, with messaging that can help unite the diverse stakeholders who are in this room and get outcomes that we'll all benefit from. So as I listened to Lane and was taking notes as you all were talking, I kept thinking about what's actionable? What are we going to do next? And I went back and I revisited our structure and started to think about what I heard and who we could assign that to. So the first item on my list is what Lane mentioned, expanding the tent, making sure we're connecting with everyone. And it's also a point that Anthony Reed raised this morning. I don't know if you remembered his slide where he had, I think it was purple, and he had communities of interest on that slide. And we're the Ag Auto Ethanol Work Group, and he had another community of interest on there, and he called it the oils. So we all know, and I can't know if anybody's still here, Chip is here. Chip, you're representing the oil universe in all of its dimensions. Well, we can assign it to you, and I see your hands going up, so thank you for volunteering. But I do think we need to have a conversation at the leadership team level about engaging just at an annual forum. Is that enough, or do we need to do something else? And remember, we're not the advocacy bodies. We're the woodshed out back where we come together and talk and exchange views and explore ideas and try to forge consensus. So that was the first action item that I heard, and we're not looking for volunteers today. I think we just have to assign that to the leadership team. The second item that I heard had to do with maybe the broad category of low-hanging fruit. And we are structured in a way that we've got subcommittees of ag auto ethanol that work on different component parts. One item I heard is more policy oriented, where we need to kind of move forward and clear the decks with getting E15 across the finish line, advancing those of you that are working on credits like 45Z. Those things probably would go under our regulations team, for lack of a better body, for us to continue to coalesce and work on. But we also heard Anthony tell us that the efforts need to go beyond just those two items. And he said we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and we need to be working on multiple things at once. So while something like the conversations we've been having around the Next Generation Fuel Act are a really big deal and a really heavy lift, and probably involving a long planning horizon, as we work on that, maybe there's some other policy related things that are going to come to the forefront. So Chris reminded me just before we came back into the room here that we need to be gearing up to prepare for rulemaking that's likely going to come. And this platform has played an active role in that space by reading the proposed rules, listening to the calls for comments, and then putting draft suggestions together for you to use in your own organizations to advance. So we've relied very heavily on our team at Boyd and Gray Associates to help do some of that background. And that feels like that's low-hanging fruit that is going to require some action on our part going forward here. Another example of a policy, I'm going to call it a dart, because there's lots of darts that we need to throw, and different stakeholders have different bullseyes with your own darts you're throwing. But as we walk and chew gum at the same time, one of the things we've talked about a lot, we've heard a lot of discussion, is wouldn't it be great if there were appropriate market signals and policy incentives to build back up flex fuel vehicle production? So what would that take? What would that look like from a automotive partner perspective? In a conversation last night, we were hearing, if you could do one thing, and I'm not going to tell you who it came from, but it was someone out of the auto family, and they said, boy, if there's one thing that you could do that would help us, it would be get that R factor relief that we've been looking for. So Mike, I don't know where that fits on the list, but that's, there we go. So that's an example of that basket of work in our policy and regs work that I think we need to keep talking about as a team and look for opportunities to do that. So if we can walk and chew gum at the same time and look for that unique opportunity where everybody's in alignment and the administration is looking for a win, and we can show up with, how about this one? Maybe we'll get lucky and that barrier can be removed pretty quickly. So regulations, policy work, there's a lot there. The next item on my list for action is the communication arena. And it goes beyond communicating. And we heard from Alexander today that we need to be educating in addition to communicating. So we've, as a outcome of last year's forum, we heard you say, let's prioritize this. So we went to work, we developed a scope of work, we've raised money, and we've tasked Alexander's team with helping us come up with ways to communicate with multiple audiences. So those will be consumers, those will be policymakers, those audiences will include regulators and petroleum marketers. I think those are the four. So that body of work, you just got an initial teaser of what's coming, is going forward, and that will be a priority for us going forward. As I was listening to the conversation today, as we were talking about readiness, and that was a big part of what we tried to do, was talk about the changing political environment, but also spotlight readiness and help people get our heads collectively around how we're actually a solution that this administration could benefit from. And part of the readiness involved the discussion of infrastructure. And sometimes we get together, we check the infrastructure box as it's largely there. We probably have done just about everything we need to do. Well, I was hearing some things that told me we need to have another conversation or two about that. So our infrastructure work group has been somewhat inactive, Christy. I mean, we haven't prioritized infrastructure issues, but maybe it's time to kind of bring that team together and revisit that and have a fresh conversation about what is it we know, what is it that maybe we don't know, and if there are a couple other hurdles that we have to jump over, since we often use road races as our analogy, what are those? So I think, Chris and Michael, that could be an action item there. For our fuel specs team work group, one of the exciting things that I heard at this meeting was when we were introduced to top tier, and not the old top tier, but what top tier might become, where they're beginning to think about establishing some type of environmental specification that could be used to promote the value add of higher quality fuels. So perhaps at Bill's invitation, he said he'd like to have a conversation with us about that. That would be an example, I think, of another place that we could carve out time and energy and have that conversation. What might that look like? Because there could be private sector standards as well as regulatory standards, and that would be a private sector standard. So though, and I maybe missed some, but as just trying to keep up with this big conversation, those were some of the ones that came to the top of the list in terms of next steps. And I think what we'd like to do now is to get your reaction. What are those actionable items sound right to you? And if not, please challenge us. And then what did we miss? What are some other important conversations, actions that we need to take as a multi-stakeholder, cross-boundary collaborative that's trying to get to our new vision statement? So let me stop babbling and throw it out and see what what you have on your minds. And I think we got a mic somewhere. Chris has got it.
Make it real easy for you. Well, I mentioned this a little bit, but I want to reiterate the idea of having data to support the longevity concept, because unlike cost savings, which I think we've done an excellent job proving that ethanol is less expensive than gasoline, and the domestic supply, which is kind of self-evident, the longevity one says that our fuel keeps engines running longer than the oil company's fuel. And that could get us into a lot of trouble if we don't have data that support it, the reports, the studies, and if there aren't any, maybe we need to get some done.
Okay. And is that, we have a vehicle testing team that we did a lot of work to gather data. I wonder if that could be a place to kind of assign that for further explanation. Everybody, or does anyone have a reaction to that data gap? Elena or Brian?
So before the question, I was going to speak, but then I decided I'll hear what the audience has to say. But I think the thing that I wanted to say is keep in mind for everyone in the room, there is no project that is not on the table. Bring it to the table because we're willing to listen. And, if it's this, there's no project that's crazy ideas. We want to hear the crazy ideas because CRC is the place where the autos work together to bring those projects. And so we align and we want to align with you to bring some of those things forward together to propose to take a look at. And they may not, we may not meet our partner on the other side with smiles, but we'll have to talk to them about those things. But we want to hear your projects just like that one. And so whether it's an ASTM specification for fuel, whether it's, we will need to look at infrastructure, terminals, pipelines, anything on the vehicle side, mid-level blends, the experiments that we need to run. We want to hear all about what you think we need to do.
That's great. That's great.
Lots of hands. I think Brian was next.
I just had a comment. When the longevity discussion was happening, I was just thinking of, how much we don't know about electric cars and how electric cars get totaled from a dent because of the battery uncertainty and so on. And my read on that was that, a high octane E25 is if it's a new standard fuel, it's not going to harm longevity. It's not going to change longevity. Dean, I don't think I would never say it's going to make the engine last longer. I would never say that. I have no basis to say that. But I certainly don't see any reason that it would be a shorter life.
And Brian, just so I'm clear, you made the statement, mid-level blends, whatever that is, E20, 25 range aren't going to harm longevity. Do we have data to back that up based on the studies if you've done so far? Are you identifying that as a data need that could use some additional work?
86 vehicles, 6.5 million miles. We drove 86 vehicles, 6.5 million miles. We didn't fail emissions tests and we didn't have any failures that were fuel related. We had some transmissions break and flat tires and ran over some deer and things like that, but there was no fuel related engine failures.
We at this point, we've also gone over 120 billion consumer miles on E15. Again, nobody's been monitoring everybody's car, but we would have certainly heard about it if there would have been a major incident.
Good. So maybe it becomes part of our communication. So I'm writing Dean's name down, Brian's and Elena's around this data work area.
I like the idea about data to support claims, and I think it is a really great claim if you can show that higher quality fuels and higher octane fuels actually increase longevity. I think that's different than showing no harm after a certain number of miles or no major complaints with E15. And I think that the study probably could be structured to verify if that's true or not compared to a baseline fuel. So that's one thing. Another thing that you asked for things that we haven't heard that maybe are important. The climate smart agriculture program, which I think now needs to be competitive or conservation smart agriculture, had a big allocation of funding to help document the benefits of using these practices in terms of productivity and soil carbon. And I think a lot of those grants have been at least temporarily canceled or stopped. I don't know if they're in the big beautiful bill, but I think that what I've heard, like from John Deere, and I know other manufacturers, is we're collecting a lot of data now on what's happening in the fields and on yields. And I think some additional complementary research could start correlating that with those practices with soil carbon, so that the data that's already being automated from these modern, from the modern equipment could help justify an improvement in environmental qualities that would then help us with the, what is it, top tier eco kind of proposal. And so anyway, a lot of the people that could be involved in this are in the room. I thought this seems like an opportunity to bring different actors together and think about how could we do that? How could we collaborate across these sectors to show that, yeah, we have these environmental benefits, and if someone, you know, if someone follows these steps, then they should qualify. Then fuels made from that grain, that corn, should qualify for this top tier eco. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Got it down.
Yeah, Jim Anderson from Ford. Yeah, I was struck by people kind of bringing up this concept that ethanol is increasing longevity of vehicles. I was scratching my head. And it sounds like maybe that's an aspirational statement. You know, we'd like that for it to be true. But I will remind people that like 10 years ago, the oil industry was kind of taken at the other side in their advertising, you know, these interviews with mechanics saying how ethanol destroyed them. We need to be cognizant of that. And, you know, even if we're just saying there is no effect, which is kind of a weak statement, that's an improvement over what the media portrayal was previously.
Graham Noyes, I just wanted to express, first off, general support. I thought this was a great session. I thought the update and the vision statement was very constructive and sort of brings us aligned with more what's happening out there. I thought a lot of interesting viewpoints and important issues were raised. And particularly the briefings from DC, so to speak, in terms of how to get things done with this new administration, with different alignment there. So obviously thinking about this unique sort of platform for bringing groups together, thinking about the way we're communicating the strategies, you know, Lane's points around all of the different components and the choices we make are really critical. Glad to hear about looking for FFV manufacturing to be brought out as one of the components. Pretty clear that that's not top of the list, but keeping that in mind as we look at sort of policy outcomes is really critical. So just wanted to touch on these points. Got to leave for a flight, but really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thanks, Graham. Oh.
Tom Leone, Southwest Research. I'm going to propose something that I think we should be working towards, and I don't think the automaker is going to want to hear it, but I think we need to talk to them and figure out if it's feasible to ask them to start putting a statement in owner's manual saying it's okay to use E25 or whatever the right number is, whether it's E20 or E30. So I know that's a radical proposal, so let me try to justify why I think that would be a useful thing to start talking about. We're at a point where there's a lot of change going on, and it's tempting just to jump in and see what we can get. But I think it would serve us better to try to take a longer viewpoint on where we want to be in 10 or 15 years, and what do we need to do first to start moving towards that vision. So here's Tom Leone's future of the next 10 or 15 years. I believe that EVs will modestly grow. They're not going to dominate CO2 CO2 benefits, not going to provide all the huge benefits that were promised a few years ago. So we need to start formulating alternative views of the future and how to achieve environmental goals, however you want to phrase them, even though it's not popular right now. So my view of the future is we need to get lower carbon intensity fuels into the market. And it'd be wonderful if we could get drop-in fuels that are compatible with all existing vehicles, but I'm a little skeptical about doing that in a really affordable way. So in my personal opinion, it would be more realistic to increase the ethanol blend in a large fraction of the fuel used in many, many new vehicles. But achieving that vision 10 or 15 years in the future requires to think about what happened 10 or 15 years in the past, right? Where we're trying to get E15 approved in vehicles. And there's this whole hullabaloo, right? DOE and Brian West and others worked for like 6 years and spent tens of millions of dollars trying to figure out whether it's okay to use E15 in older vehicles. It generated a lot of controversy and a lot of pushbacks to the automakers. So instead of going through that again 10 or 15 years from now for E20, why don't we start planning ahead and start asking the automakers, hey, would it be hard for you to start approving new vehicles for E20 now, or maybe even E25 if we want to stretch it? You know, my perception is it's not going to be a materials compatibility challenge for them. I don't think it's going to be, not really going to change their mechanical designs, in my opinion. They are going to have to start working on emissions compliance and failure modes and onboard diagnostics and protecting themselves against mill lights 10 or 15 years from now, when and if people start using E20 or E25. So I think we need to start convincing the automakers to talk about it. And, you know, they're going to need to figure out who the right people are. It may not be the people in the room today, but they need to, you know, get on board with this vision for the future. Do they really think they're going to solve future problems with EVs? Do they need to start thinking about lower carbon fuels? And if so, what is their vision for future lower carbon fuels? Do they really believe we're going to get affordable drop-in hydrocarbon fuels? Or do they want to start working together to protect for higher ethanol blends? If so, now's the time to figure out together what is the right blend. How do we start protecting vehicles for it so those vehicles are on the road in large numbers 10 or 15 years from now? And then we can worry about the refueling infrastructure and the supply and all that other stuff that comes later.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
For those who are here, Tom, you may not have been here, but Dominic DeChico years ago said, hey, EPA approved E15. They sent a signal. We responded and we've made E15, you know, we've said that our cars are safe for E15. I said, well, why don't you send a message to EPA and make your cars E25 compatible? And he took my head off. So I'm so glad to hear you say that. Thank you very much. And I completely agree. We've been saying this for 5 years, right? The autos should lead.
And even though he spent some time in the auto world, he's not wearing an auto hat. So thank you for the suggestion. So we won't have time to act on that today, but this is a great item to put on our plate to have the conversation. I'm not sure where to assign that, but we can have that conversation, whether that's fuel specs or engine vehicle testing. I'm not sure, but it's a great action item to at least have the conversation.
Actually, do you guys want to talk to that or you want to talk to something else? All right.
Go for it.
Yeah.
All right, just 2 comments. I'm gonna go right back to the longevity one. My advice, don't say that. It's gonna be really easy to disprove. Y'all, I mean, I spent a lot of years doing flex fuel development. Now that's E85. There's a lot of clever engineers that will find out where you're wrong. I just can't think the hypothesis where I can prove to you that ethanol will always make the engine last longer. Some cases, yes, I'll design you a test that'll prove it wrong. So my advice, just do like Brian said, just say you'll do no harm. That's probably better. Don't make claims you can't prove, because you're not gonna be able to prove it. You're not, and it's probably not true. The reason is, so the other one I just want to get at, maybe it's because I'm an engineer. I want to be very careful when you guys, because I remember we used to talk about, oh, ethanol gives you better MPGs because it's higher efficiency. That's not true either. Efficiency, miles per gallon are 2 separate things. You got to be very careful with your words, because what happens is you get the wrong words out there. People just say, oh, those ethanol guys are just full of it again. They're making exaggerated claims. We went through this. You can't take one test and say, oh, look, this Toyota got better miles per gallon. No, there's something else going on. But anyway, I just want to say, be careful. So the reason I'm bringing it up is when I came here, I said, what about improved fuel quality? What the hell are you talking about? I'm not trying to be mean, but are you talking octane? Are you talking detergents? What are we talking about? Be very careful when you say quality. And again, maybe it's because I'm an engineer. Tell me what you mean by quality, because you do have a great octane story. You got a PMI story. You got a homegrown story. You got other toxic emissions. You know, you don't make as, well, it depends on the blend. You might make some aldehydes and such, but you got other good stories. And if you don't spin it as quality, I think you actually have a better luck.
Okay, thank you,
My
Steve.
opinion.
Helpful guidance. We'll remember that as we go forward and have the conversations as we leave.
So I think it was like 4 years ago that we had the conversation here where Adam was giving the Valero guys a super hard time, but the corn grower folks came and joined the oil industry in challenging a lot of the really idiotic Biden era vehicle regs. And then towards the end of the administration, the ethanol folks got involved too. And really until the CRA, the autos have been like, I've gotten lots of calls that have been like, hey, we hope you win. We agree with you. It's not going to be everything, but I do think one of the key things for making sure that good things happen isn't just going to be good comments, and the auto comments are always very sophisticated and always very good. So I do think knowledge sharing is important, but I think it's beyond that. I think it's in the advocacy realm as well, and it's something just for friends in the auto world. I think we're going to have a lot better success, especially with this administration where courts are very skeptical of what they're up to. If you've got a coalition of interveners that include the auto industry and the fuel industry and agriculture all together saying, no, this is a good idea. This is lawful. Here's why. That is, I think that's where things have been trending, but I want to say that I think that's extremely important for actually realizing the ideas that we're talking about here once they get put into place and they get challenged, because everything will get challenged that this administration does. The success of that is going to depend in no small part on who's there to help.
Very much aligns with Anthony. I think in the back, Chris.
Hi, I'm Andrea Rizal from US Car, but I have an SAE hat on for the moment. This is not a US Car comment, and this is only my second time at the Ag Auto Ethanol meeting, so this is a question more than a comment. But I'm curious about if you should consider widening your tent. I think the automotive industry is probably the single largest sector for this. But last year at the fall, what used to be known as the Powertrain Fuels and Lubes meeting, we had a panel, and we called it Special Topics, and it had defense, it had off-road, it had rail, it had marine, it had recreational marine. And what I heard from all of them is the same pain points, right? Mercury Marine was on there talking about, yeah, they're interested in methanol and ethanol because they have zero interest in electrification, right? So you have all these sectors that DOE likes to call hard to electrify, right? Or in some cases, impossible to electrify. And it seems like if you're trying to build momentum and really get a message out, why aren't you inviting all these other engine stakeholders to, maybe join the movement, right?
Yep.
So with that, I'll say, a good opportunity for that is either at the SAE meeting this fall that Elena is chairing, or, the ASME internal combustion engine meeting. I'm happy to send you information about that, which I'm co-chairing this fall in Milwaukee in October. That's the audience, right? Those are the engine people. Come talk to them and talk to a cross-cut audience, small engine, recreational marine, like rail, because I think now is a good time, right, to give them an alternative.
Great suggestion. I think that hits both the suggestion that we widen our tent and we communicate differently and to different audiences. Thank you.
This is probably more of a minor one that I discussed with Chris yesterday, and I don't know if it goes on Growth's Energy website or National Corn Growers, but that food versus fuel thing is cropping up a lot. Boston Airport asked me if I could present on that next week. I'm like, oh, well, I won't get that slide approved, but I can certainly, speak to it, because you do have these different engine manufacturers and people in the conversation. So we had talked about bringing it back to the Alternative Fuel Data Center, but we're unable to make any updates to that website currently. So, I think just a landing page with fact. We used to have one that was facts and myths, but just something to that extent should be easy, right?
Yeah, I think we're happy to do it. I can answer that one quickly. But I think beyond that, Marty put out a lot of great data too on yield improvements and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff on that, but it is a good point, Christy, that this is sort of bubbling back up. We hear it as we talk about SAF and as we talk about ethanol as marine and certainly on the international side too.
Melissa Prisbillo, Toyota, you stole my comment because I was gonna say that if we can get ahead of what we know is coming, the food versus fuel argument is coming. People remember it, they'll bring it right back up and it resonates to people. Food prices are up, things like that. It's gonna be very important to, the stuff that we saw was that isn't an issue. We have enough. We feed, the food with the food or what, so like if we can get ahead of it before they bring it up, maybe that gives us a little more, I don't know, authority or whatever it is, to say that, we're not just reacting to their comments. We already know this. We've researched it. Here's the data. Because it's coming back. That will come back.
So that's another place that maybe our comms team could go back and revisit what we've already got and the cat that 9 lives. I think this is the cat that has 99 lives. But sure, we need to be ready and because we've got good data and responses when that comes up.
So with respect to food versus fuel, I operate in this space all the time and have for 30 years. It's a very nuanced topic. With respect to food grade oil, what it comes down to is the elasticities and substitution components. So it's economic science. Food grade oil and wheat flour are the two most inelastic agriculture commodities. Okay, and it's really important for you to understand that there's no price that China won't pay to have enough food grade oil to put oil in every wok. There's same thing, no price that Egypt won't pay to make sure that the poorest people have one loaf of bread a day. So some of these food versus fuel issues are legit and it's nuanced. I think the SAF industry is very right to be concerned about that because today the HEFA process is the only way we get SAF. That's the hydrogenation of esters and fatty acids. Alcohol to jet is 10 years away from commercial volume, serious where you have regular investors, entrepreneurs doing it. We're still a very long way technically from being able to execute that. So SAF has to run that course of food versus fuel. And with respect to food grade oil, they're probably on the losing end of that, for some time. Now, the world has enough of that to do some SAF, but not to convert, some of these net zero ideas are just ridiculous. It will never happen. With using fats and oils. I'm saying it cannot happen. We have to get to the point where starch, the key thing for starches is that there's lots of substitution. We have lots more ability to greatly increase the amount of starch growing around the world because of how many high latitudes can grow wheat. So it's not just corn. Corn is the best thing in terms of how many bushels an acre you can get. But if we really want a ton of SAF and we have the technology to go alcohol to jet, the world can bring tons and tons of starch, which is an animal feed, more than it is a food. So I just want to caution you, it's a nuanced subject and the food versus fuel people many times have a legitimate argument to make.
Okay, thank you, Marty.
I think I'm going to read. You're good? All right. Tom, did you?
All right, I already irritated my auto colleagues, so it's time to irritate the ethanol guys. So I heard you make a proposal or summarize someone's proposal about trying to get flex fuel vehicle credits. I'm pretty skeptical about that. I don't see that anything has changed since the last time they decided to take away the flex fuel vehicle credits. I don't understand why it's going to work any better now. So if someone understands that or has an idea why it will, I'd love to hear it. But I personally don't feel that it's going to go very far or achieve very much or achieve any scale.
And we have talked about that with our level the playing field team. And what we heard from the autos was they're not looking for a special credit. They're looking for the level, the playing field to be leveled so that they can compete. And I think Graham brought that up. He was advocating for flex fuel vehicle credit. So it's being discussed, but I think the bigger conversation is about how do we, as Rick Gazelle said, level the playing field.
Steve.
I was just going to talk about SAS, but FFEs, I agree with Tom. I mean, level the playing field. The problem is you don't get credit if people don't use it. It's kind of tough to build it and then not get credit. You don't make flex fuels for free. So, but I wanted to say on the SAS, when we talk about things that also I would like to, I say you should change the narrative on. We're doing our side on the auto side, but the idea that there's only enough biomass in the United States for SAFs. SAFs have done a great marketing campaign. We're the only ones that get the biomass because we can't electrify, we can't do anything else. Is somewhere where I think if you were to just say, we want to open up, level the playing field, everybody can access some biofuels. We would like auto industry, and industry can then figure out the most to spread this biomass. So I'm referring to the 1 billion ton study. And if you look at DOE's guidelines, they have a nice chart and it ends right at SAF. There's no biomass for anybody else. So.
Thank you. So what else did we miss? We've covered a lot of ground and we're probably half brain dead at this point, but the purpose of this session was to make sure when we leave that we've got the actionable items captured so that as we go forward, we're focusing on the things that you are telling us are most important.
Ernie, Mike Hartrick from Auto Innovators here. I'm not going to crap all over Tom's idea. In fact, I guess the way what I would suggest as a next step here, though, is automakers have a completely full plate in the regulatory and policy space. So if you really want to be heard out on these concepts, and I don't think conceptually that there's an issue here as much as, okay, we have to figure out how that would really happen without incurring significant costs is maybe the right way to say it. I mean, there may be enough benefit there if we do it the right way where, you know, the costs are absorbable. So I don't want to say no. What I do want to say is I think the next step needs to be, you know, a targeted meeting of those minds. It can't be going to conferences. You know, I heard the suggestion go to the SAE conference and present something, right? Great. So somebody like me, I'll just use myself as an example, goes and hears this something, but you know, my plate's full. I'm probably not going to drive that forward within the organization. Or somebody from the automaker, they show up and they hear, okay, that's an interesting idea. And then, you know, it just falls off the plate because the plate's already full. So if you really want to do something targeted and say, okay, we really want to talk about, you know, you say you want high octane, low carbon fuels. We say we want high octane, low carbon fuels. We need to have some sort of pathway in the future, as Tom was describing. You know, what's it going to take to get there? Let's spend 2 or 3 hours together and make that discussion happen, at least, and then we can identify what the barriers are and how we might address those barriers.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's incumbent on the automakers to. Yeah, I don't think you're going to get working level engineers to work on it because it's not on their plate, right? Their management is not on board. So automakers need to figure out if their policy folks are interested in this. And if so, how do they start talking about it? And their plates are full too. But like I said, now is the time when a lot of things are changing and it's the time to bring it up, try to have the conversation and see if you can get the automaker policy people to buy into the concept and then start working on the next steps of, okay, if we agree with the concept, what's the right number? Is it E20? Is it E25? How do we do it? You know, what are the obstacles and costs?
Okay, and I think we've got a home to have that small conversations with our level the playing field team that was put together to, I think, at least consider part. Okay, I hear you. Yeah, open the doors a little wider. Good.
I just wanted to offer to help Christy or others on the food versus fuel issue, and happy to talk more with Marty and others. I worked with Tom Hertel and Wally Tyner and the GTAP team for many years when I first came back to the States, and those elasticity factors, they have to base them on something. So they base them on actual shocks, major disruptions in supply that then allows them to look at this substitution effect and impact on prices. That's totally different than something like an RFS that says, we're going to create demand for this fuel over this time. And we actually outperformed. The supply was always more than the target. And so this, if you assume supply is fixed and you shock it, yeah, you're going to have this big problem with food versus fuel. But when you create a new market, a new way to expand production, and you give a whole lot of people an opportunity to participate in that market, you actually improve food security because you have more people producing more product in more places with more technology investment. And it's not the same as what they're modeling with these assumed elasticity factors based on my experience, but happy to talk.
Just initially, like with the questions that I'm getting, and since we're an ethanol thing here, just keep it simple initially, just like the little bullet points, like how much the value of corn. That's what I'm going to bring up at Boston Airport's event next week, the value of corn and box corn flakes. But just start with the US-based corn ethanol industry. I mean, we can move into the wider topics, but like I feel like those are the questions that I personally have fielded quite a bit of in the past year.
Okay, thank you, Christy.
I just wanted to mention that when we say you were asking what's missing, I want to go back to some of the things that was in Alexander's slides, and I'm really interested to see the final report out of what he gathers. Our CEO has said we will build what our customers want to buy. And so where we need your help, I believe, is talking to our customers. And if that's based on the nationalism theme, we want to support the farming community, I think everyone in this room can help us have our customers see buying a vehicle that uses E15 or higher level ethanol blends is what they want. Then if they're asking for it at the dealers, it gets back to, our planning groups. And I think the other thing too is if the different party is looking for environmental friendliness, maybe not performance, maybe not fuel economy, but environmental friendliness, how does the ethanol community speak about the environmental friendliness of the fuel? And so remember, help us speak to our customers and your customers about the fuel. And I think when they're coming in and saying, we want these vehicles, that will trigger GM, Ford, Toyota to be able to make those, right? Because our CEOs will say, this is what Main Street's asking for. This is what the farming community is asking for, not just what Wall Street's asking for.
Good, great point. And that reinforces the importance of this study that's underway, and we'll be receiving more information and producing a report. I don't want to put a date out there, but I think we're thinking, this is late spring, summer. This isn't next fall, next spring. This is something within the next 3 months that we would imagine we would turn around and get back out to everyone.
Can I just bring up something? Just a reminder, we talked about this in this room and similar rooms several times over the years, but Dave Lose had the foresight to ask our friends at Boyd and Gray to write a application specification for an E25 cert fuel to submit to EPA. We could never get anybody to submit it. I just asked Jimmy if that's still kind of ready to go, and he said yes. So, and I asked Lane if it was okay for me to bring this up. But if somebody would, an engine manufacturer, I think it has to be an engine manufacturer. Doesn't have to be an auto, but it would be ideal if it were. But what a signal that would send. Put that in there, and everybody goes, "Oh God, what are they doing? What are they doing?" It'd be on the books. Nobody has to use it. It's just like if you sent Oak Ridge $1 million. It didn't mean you're going to spend $1 million. It just meant it was there in case we needed it. So, to Tom's point about the owner's manuals. So I just wanted to remind everybody that that's out there. Thank you.
Okay, well noted. Thank you.
We too submitted, suggested a E30 cert fuel in 2012 to EPA and to California. They didn't take us up on it either, unfortunately.
That was then, this is now, right?
Correct.
So anything else? I know we're closing in on the closeout from our co-chairs, but this has been great feedback. And this isn't the end of it. If you think of other important component parts that we need to be building into our work program on your way home or in the next day or two, please send them to us, because this is what this is about. We are bottom up. We're nothing more than the sum of our collective parts. So thank you all for your contributions and input. And Chris and Michael, back to you to close us out.
Well, wow, what a difference a year makes. I think last year at this annual AAE meeting, we were discussing the proposed multi-pollutant rule that showed about 70% EVs in 2032. We have a new administration now. The doors seem to be at least open right now. There's a crack. We haven't seen a whole lot of changes, at least from the auto perspective, but allegedly, based on the things that have been occurring, that things are afoot. So before I talk much longer, I wanted to make sure I thanked the organizing committee for all their hard work putting together this excellent program over the last 2 days. I'd also like to thank all the speakers that spent time and their efforts to travel here and give excellent presentations. And I'd also like to thank all of you that came to the Ag Auto Ethanol Forum this year. It's been great discussions. It's also excellent to be in person and have sidebar conversations that just don't happen over email or Zooms or whatever. So thanks again. I don't have a whole lot more, but I do want to focus on something that Anthony mentioned in his presentation, that words matter. And how you use those words is very, very important. And as such, we've also made changes to our vision statement to align to a broader stakeholder group, making sure that we're cognizant of what the current administration and potentially future administrations and customers value. So I also wanted to touch upon something that Elena just mentioned, that the market matters. So I think we've seen with the previous EPA rules, they've gotten way out ahead of where the market is on EVs. So the market customers will ultimately decide what vehicle and fuel choices that they will put in or purchase vehicles, or what fuels they put in their vehicles to drive. So I just want to say thanks again, and I'll hand it over to Chris.
Thanks, Michael. I won't add too much. I'll thank the organizing committee speakers. I'd also like to thank the Corn family for dinner last night. I meant to do that this morning. Thank you, guys. I thought that was fantastic. I think we all agreed it was better not scrambling to the restaurant or wherever else. So that was greatly appreciated. Great time to spend. It was also great, certainly, to pay tribute. This entire meeting paid tribute to Dave Blows, both last night and throughout the meeting. Likewise, as Michael said, thank you everybody for coming. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces, but it's also nice to see some new blood too. Seeing the US car folks back again. We used to go up to Southfield, Josh, first timers, I think. So I appreciate you guys being here. And a lot of good participation. I think a couple of things I would seize on also from Anthony. Liquid fuels are back. As Michael said, if you look back at last year, I don't want to say it was doom and gloom, but 70% EVs. And now I think we have a window of opportunity. We are back in a situation where I think we can talk about solutions we have on the liquid fuel side. And so I think we need to keep the momentum up. It was a lot of great discussion, whether that's smaller groups talking about how we can formulate comments, whether that's groups of us in DC with some of your partners in DC. Happy to keep that conversation going. But again, thank you, safe travels, and let's keep the conversation going. Thanks, everybody.